A fleet is moving, an armada is assembling, sanctions are tightening like a vice. And behind closed doors in Oman, the United States and Iran are talking again. After months of missile strikes, bombed nuclear facilities, and open threats of retaliation, Washington and Tehran have quietly stepped back into diplomacy. President Donald Trump called the discussions very good. Iranian officials say they enter negotiations with open eyes and a steady memory of what unfolded last year. The language is careful, the tone is guarded, the stakes are enormous. But this is not a peace summit. This is pressure meeting pressure, power confronting power, a high-stakes geopolitical showdown unfolding under the cover of negotiation. I'm Livia, and this is Global Shift Analysis. Today, we examine what happened in Oman, who was in the room, what was truly on the table, and what may come next. Because the line between diplomacy and war in the Middle East has rarely been this thin or this dangerous. Although the talks were indirect, the people involved made clear just how serious this moment is. Representing Iran was Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, a seasoned diplomat tasked with defending Tehran's nuclear position, while navigating mounting economic and military pressure. On the American side was Steve Witkoff, President Trump's envoy, carrying Washington's demands and strategic red lines into the negotiations. Also present was Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, whose previous involvement in Middle East diplomacy makes his appearance more than symbolic. His inclusion signals that this dialogue carries political weight inside the White House itself. Serving as mediator was Oman's Foreign Minister Badr al-Busaidi, once again playing the quiet but critical role Muscat has often assumed. In back-channel U.S.-Iran diplomacy, he met separately with both delegations, shuttling proposals and responses between rooms, a deliberate structure designed to reduce direct confrontation while preserving leverage. But perhaps the most revealing presence came through official photos released by Oman's state-run news agency, Admiral Brad Cooper, commander of U.S. Central Command. That detail matters. When the officer responsible for overseeing American military operations across the Middle East is present during diplomatic talks, it signals that negotiation and military planning are unfolding simultaneously. The format mirrored earlier rounds: indirect exchanges, tightly managed messaging, cautious language. Iranian media described it as consistent with previous mediated engagements. Yet the atmosphere this time is fundamentally different. The region has already endured airstrikes, missile launches, and retaliatory operations. Trust is almost non-existent, and beyond the conference rooms, military assets remain on standby, ready to move if diplomacy fails. What exactly was discussed behind those closed doors remains partially opaque, but several critical elements have emerged. According to Iranian media reports, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi presented what was described as a preliminary plan to Oman's Foreign Minister Badr al-Busaidi. The proposal was framed as an effort to manage the current situation between Tehran and Washington, language that suggests crisis control rather than reconciliation. Al-Busaidi then carried that proposal to the American delegation led by Steve Witkoff, maintaining the indirect format that has defined these engagements. The U.S. response, in turn, was to be relayed back to the Iranian side through the same shuttle diplomacy process. Even before the talks began, Iran drew firm boundaries. Iranian officials publicly insisted they were willing to discuss only matters directly related to the nuclear program, and nothing beyond it. That meant no negotiations over Iran's ballistic missile arsenal, no discussions about Tehran's regional proxy network operating across the Middle East, no dialogue about domestic unrest or the government's crackdown on protests. For Iran, the agenda was singular: nuclear rights and the lifting of sanctions. Washington sees the situation differently. The United States has pushed for a broader framework, one that includes limits on Iran's ballistic missile program, constraints on Tehran's armed proxy groups that continue to pose risks to U.S. and Israeli interests, and accountability regarding what American officials describe as a brutal domestic crackdown. From the U.S. perspective, the nuclear issue cannot be separated from Iran's wider regional behavior. At the center of the dispute remains uranium enrichment, the most sensitive and technically consequential issue of all. Iran insists it has the sovereign right to enrich uranium for civilian energy purposes. Enrichment, however, sits at the heart of international concern. While low-level enrichment can fuel nuclear reactors, higher levels of purification can shorten the pathway to a nuclear weapon. That dual-use nature makes enrichment both legal under certain frameworks and deeply controversial in practice. The United States and its allies reject Iran's continued enrichment at levels they consider dangerous. Tehran, for its part, has offered to accept monitoring mechanisms and verification measures designed to ensure the program is not weaponized. But those concessions come with a price: sanctions relief. Iran wants economic restrictions lifted in exchange for nuclear transparency and limits. The standoff is stark. Iran demands recognition of its enrichment rights and the removal of sanctions. The United States seeks limits, or potentially a halt, to enrichment, alongside broader concessions tied to missiles and regional activity. And then came the signal that diplomacy does not equal de-escalation. Immediately after the talks concluded on Friday, Washington imposed new sanctions targeting Iranian oil exports and 14 vessels involved in transporting that oil. The timing was unmistakable. Dialogue continues, but economic pressure intensifies. State Department Deputy Spokesperson Tommy Pigott underscored that message, stating that instead of investing in its people and deteriorating infrastructure, the Iranian regime continues to fund destabilizing activities around the world and step up its repression inside Iran. The implication was clear. Negotiations may be underway, but leverage remains in full force. All of this diplomacy is unfolding beneath the shadow of unmistakable military movement. The United States has repositioned major assets closer to the Middle East, including the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group, a floating projection of American air power capable of launching sustained combat operations. The message is not subtle. Negotiations may be taking place in conference rooms, but force remains within immediate reach. President Trump reinforced that signal publicly. He previously stated that the United States had an armada moving toward Iran just in case. Even after describing the Oman discussions as productive, he doubled down on that posture, saying, "We have a big armada and we have a big fleet heading in that direction. Gonna be there pretty soon, so we'll see how that works out." The phrasing leaves little ambiguity. Diplomacy continues, but deterrence is active. This is strategic signaling at its clearest. By moving visible military power into the region, Washington strengthens its negotiating leverage. The presence of carrier strike groups, bombers, and forward-deployed assets is meant to remind Tehran that talks are occurring from a position of strength. Yet this same posture carries inherent risk. When forces are mobilized and rhetoric intensifies, the margin for miscalculation narrows. A single incident, a missile test, a proxy strike, a misinterpreted maneuver could escalate rapidly. Regional governments are acutely aware of this danger. Gulf states and neighboring countries have quietly worked to de-escalate tensions, understanding that a direct confrontation between the United States and Iran would ripple far beyond the battlefield. Energy markets, shipping routes, domestic stability, all would be affected. Iran, meanwhile, has issued its own warning. Officials have made clear that any future American strike will not be met with the same restraint shown last summer. That statement carries weight. Iran is widely believed to possess thousands of missiles and drones capable of targeting U.S. troops, regional bases, and allied assets. More importantly, Tehran has already demonstrated a willingness to use them when it believes deterrence requires it. Last summer offered a preview of how quickly escalation can unfold. After U.S. bombers struck Iranian nuclear facilities, Tehran responded with an unprecedented missile strike in Qatar, targeting Al Udeid Air Base, the largest American military installation in the Middle East. That response was not symbolic. It was a calibrated demonstration of reach and intent. The message was unmistakable. Iran is willing to escalate if it believes its core interests are under attack. If a broader war were to erupt, Tehran would not be without options. Iran is widely believed to possess thousands of missiles and drones capable of striking U.S. forces, allied bases, and strategic infrastructure across the region. Beyond its conventional arsenal, it maintains a network of regional proxy forces that could target Israel and American assets from multiple fronts, stretching defenses and complicating response strategies. Then there is geography, perhaps Iran's most powerful strategic asset. The Strait of Hormuz remains one of the world's most critical energy choke points. More than 1/5 of globally traded oil passes through that narrow corridor, along with a significant share of liquefied natural gas shipments. Even temporary disruption could send immediate shockwaves through global markets. Oil prices would likely surge, energy supplies could tighten, inflationary pressures could intensify worldwide. What is being negotiated in Oman, therefore, extends far beyond enrichment levels or sanction schedules. The stakes are measured in regional stability, global energy security, and the fragile balance between deterrence and war. The outcome could shape not only the Middle East's trajectory, but the broader global order. The United States and Iran are talking again, but fleets are moving across strategic waters. Sanctions are tightening around Iran's economy, and trust between these two adversaries is nearly non-existent. Diplomacy is alive, yet it is fragile, operating under the constant shadow of military force and economic pressure. What happens next will depend on whether Washington and Tehran can find common ground on uranium enrichment, sanctions relief, and the broader question of regional influence. If compromise proves impossible, pressure tactics on both sides could harden positions and push this confrontation toward open conflict. The Middle East stands at a crossroads once again, and if escalation comes, the consequences will not remain contained within the region. Energy markets, global security, and international stability would all feel the impact. I'm Livia, and this has been Global Shift Analysis. If you value clear, strategic breakdowns of global power shifts, subscribe and stay informed as we continue tracking the forces reshaping the international order. Because in today's world, geopolitics moves fast, and understanding it is no longer optional.